Hello, everyone. Welcome to Achieving Success with Olivia Akin. I'm your host, Olivia Akin. Each week, we will discuss the roadmap of achieving your personal and professional success. We give you real-life stories on growing personally and professionally to achieve your life and the career goals with the help of some top-notch guests. Today, we are speaking with Tom Hardin. Tom is the founder and CEO of TipperX Advisors, LLC. TipperX Advisors, LLC engages with firms that seek to enhance their compliance and ethics culture beyond traditional employee training. As a compelling to an existing legal and regulatory program, Tom delivers a live training experience which functions both as a cautionary tale and as a way for compliance and ethics leadership to get increased buy-in from both leadership and frontline employees. Prior to starting his business, Tom previously spent his career as a financial analyst in the hedge fund industry. Tom became one of the Okay, we're going to start one more time. I'm having a day. We're coming back from the holidays and Olivia's just
Exactly. It's all good. The first week.
yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Achieving Success with Olivia Akin. I'm your host, Olivia Akin. Each week, we will discuss the roadmap of achieving your personal and professional success. We give you real-life stories on growing personally and professionally to achieve your life and career goals with the help of some top-notch guests. Today, we are speaking with Tom Hardin. Tom is the founder and CEO of TipperX Advisors, LLC. TipperX Advisors, LLC engages with firms that seek to enhance their compliance and ethics culture beyond traditional employee training. As a compellant to an existing legal and regulatory program, Tom delivers a live training experience which functions both as a cautionary tale and as a way for compliance and ethics leadership to get increased buy-in from both leadership and frontline employees. Prior to starting his business, Tom previously spent his career as a financial analyst in the hedge fund industry. In 2008, Tom became one of the most prolific informants in the history of the Securities Fraud Division within the FBI. You can find Tom on LinkedIn by searching Tom Hardin, TipperX, or by going to his website, tipperx.com. Hello, Tom. It's fantastic having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me on today, Olivia. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so excited to dive in because you and I have had so many conversations and talking about our journeys in life. But to start off the show, can you tell me what success means and looks like to Tom Hardin?
Sure. So at 29 years old, I had to start over. I lost everything due to my own choices, which we'll get into, and had to redefine my life. For me today in my 40s, success is not about money or career or fame as I thought it was in my 20s. For me, it's about living by a personal code of values that includes, honesty, responsibility, accountability, emotional connection, and it's really about, I think, continuous improvement and growth, and not trying to reach a final destination. And I think everything else in my life is a side effect of this.
And I love how you brought up the fact of continuous growth, being centered. A lot of what you were saying is like being centered and true to yourself and understanding we're all on that journey. So let's dive in a little bit to the many twists and turns that we can all have personally and professionally. And for you, you brought up how you definitely went through that quickly. You mentioned at 29, everything changed. How did you get into the hedge fund industry? And what was the journey like on, being tapped by the FBI and then becoming an informant?
Sure. So I grew up in the 1980s, 1990s in the Atlanta suburbs, middle class family. Father worked for Coca-Cola, mother stayed at home with myself and my two brothers. In the 90s, you only applied to three colleges: your Reach school, which was the University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School of Business, my middle school, and my safety school. So applied to three schools, got deferred to regular admissions at Penn, and got waitlisted. And so finally got in. I think they had a quota from people from Georgia, maybe. So I was lucky to get in. Had a fantastic experience at Penn. Graduated early 2000s and started working in investment banking for a few months. And after my fourth all-nighter, as people might be familiar with the investment banking programs, I got recruited by a hedge fund in Greenwich, Connecticut. And so a hedge fund, if people aren't familiar, is you invest in primarily stocks. You can bet on stocks going up, and you can also bet that stocks are going to go down by shorting those stocks. And some of the most highly compensated people in the world are hedge fund managers. They get to keep a percentage of the assets that they manage and also keep 20% of the profits. So as a young person in my 20s, it was a very meritocratic organization, very flat organization. There was no politics. If you pick the right stocks, you can make millions of dollars in your 20s. And if you pick some bad stocks, you could get fired. But I like that because I could see my scorecard, in real time as how I was doing at the company. I also became aware that insider trading was rampantly going on in my industry. And that, for people that aren't familiar, is buying or selling stocks with information that's not public, so not available to the public, and material. If it were public, it would move stock prices. At some point in the mid 2000s now, like 60% of companies before they were bought, you could pull up their stock price charts and see the stock prices going up for weeks before this news was public. So it was clearly this was happening. I never felt I had to cross that line in my career until one day my boss made our goals very short term. We went from investing over a 3 to 5 year horizon to he came into my office one day and said, Tom, we have to make money every month now or we may not survive. So the goals went from 1 to 3 years to monthly. Anytime something like that happens in a business, the opportunity to start cutting corners certainly increases. And I'd also say the ambiguous message from my manager to do what it takes to meet a shorter term target without me asking any clarifying questions played a part in my next few decisions. A few more months go by. I received an insider tip on a stock from another analyst that I know. She says, everybody's doing this, Tom, and this company is going to be acquired in a few weeks. Here's the date. Here's the stock. Here's the company that's going to buy it, and here's the name of the private equity firm involved in this. So right there, a very explicit tip. I didn't buy this stock because to me it sounded like illegal inside information, but I shared it with a friend at another firm who was losing money that month. He's like, "Are you hearing anything? I need something to make money on." And I said, hey, I'm not going to trade this, but this woman just called me. This is going to happen in a few weeks. Just right there. So if people are ever in the situation, you can actually be charged with insider trading just for sharing information. I haven't traded yet. Apparently, he buys a ton of stock, tells his whole company. He calls me back and says, we're all in. Tom, did you buy some yet? And as the junior person at my hedge fund, I could buy a stock in our portfolio and not have to talk to my boss as long as it was less than 1% of the assets we manage for clients, like a new idea I'm working on, buy a little bit, do some more work, about a 0.9% position. And I can tell you, Olivia, I totally rationalized it. I said, these other guys are making millions. I'll just buy a small amount. I said, I'll do it just this one time and never do it again. I said, if my boss has a problem, he'll ask me about it and, he'll have an issue with it. I said, you know what? I can buy this stock and the moral scale in my head. I said, I'm still a good guy. Like I go to church, faithful husband, do all these great things in my life. I can buy this stock. make thousands of trades a year. So I try to minimize it. And it happened 3 more times this way where she would call with the tips. I would buy a little bit of stock. My boss not asking any questions, which I think played a part in my psychology and the rationalization. And it happened 4 times. Personally, I made $46,000 on these trades as the junior partner, so it wasn't a lot of money in terms of somebody's entire career. And the FBI was in my face in New York City 7 months after that fourth trade. Tom, we know about your four trades. They knew that I was just down in Atlanta visiting my baby nephew that week. And back, this is now 2008, the middle of the financial crisis. My first thought with the FBI in my face on the street was, oh my God, my dad's going to kill me. What's he going to say? I'm still in my 20s, very close to him. And I thought, oh my God, my wife's going to leave me. 85% of marriages end. I found out later when a spouse takes a felony, she didn't marry this insider trader. She married probably the future hedge fund manager. And I thought, oh my God, this might impact my career. Oh my God, I might be going to prison. But it went from dad to prison. I immediately start making implicating statements. Yes, I made those four trades. The FBI is writing it all down. I never didn't ask them to prove it. And they said, Tom, you can help us out. Do you know this is going on in the industry? I'm like, guys, it's rampantly going on. And I think they were so shocked because I was actually just confessing to them right there. I wasn't trying to make up a cover story or I heard a rumor. Let me talk to a lawyer. They said, what do you guys want to know what's going on? And then I said, should I talk to an attorney? And they're like, we'll let you know when you can do that. So they play by their own set of ethics, didn't talk to an attorney, called them back a few days later. I said, I do know of this going on. It's rapidly going on. I'm so confused though. Like, how do I even help you with what you're doing? And at that point, they told me I'd have to wear a body wire for them. So I'll pause there and clear up anything that, if you want to, I can continue with the story.
Well, I think as this story is unfolding, and we definitely want to hear the rest of it because I know the listeners definitely can take a lot out of what you're saying and just the journey. But it was one decision, and it was something that in that time everyone was doing, as you said, even though part of you knew, okay, I shouldn't be doing this. This isn't ethical. That line got blurred as well because everyone around you is doing it. So becomes, okay, my boss isn't saying anything. My coworkers are telling me to do it. And so it can be very hard sometimes when everyone around you is making it seem like it's acceptable, especially at this level when there's laws being broken on the ramifications that can happen. And so definitely keep telling your story. And I think our audience can really relate that how little things can add up.
Yeah, the incremental decisions. I didn't go to work that day in the first trade saying, let me go break the law today. It seems like a great day to break the law. But I went home having bought that stock, actually committing securities fraud just by a few keystrokes. So yes, the incremental decisions, the culture at the time all plays a huge part. So the FBI is now in my face, confronting me about this. And they said I could help them out. I have to wear a body wire. So for 2 years, middle of the financial crisis, they had me running around Wall Street. I'm getting some major players much older than me, not really in my social network, like a 48-year-old big time hedge fund. I'm a 29-year-old analyst. I'd meet people at Starbucks, usually just the auspices of the meeting where I'm interviewing for a job. It's a financial crisis. I had a terrible year, which is actually a pretty good cover story. And, I had these 4 trades last year. How do you do it, hedge fund manager? But if I'm meeting with you, you don't know me that well, and I'm asking you about times you also broke the law, you might look at me and think, why is this guy I don't know that well asking me such pointed questions? One individual got in 15 face-to-face conversations. He'd say nothing. He'd always change the subject. I thought, oh my God, this guy's on to me. He knows I'm, wearing a wire. Calls me on a Sunday afternoon. He says, Tom, we need to have dinner tonight. We need to talk. Called the FBI and said, this guy you want wants to have dinner with me tonight. They got super excited. They met me at the Grand Central train station in Manhattan, gave me the wire. I took the train up to Greenwich. This guy picked me up at the train station. He said, Tom, good to see you. I brought swim trunks for you. We're going swimming at my mother's house. So The Sopranos was popular that summer. All these ideas were going through my head. I played it cool, got into his car. We drove to this old mansion in Greenwich. He starts disrobing in this room. He wants to see if something's taped to my chest. It was in my front pocket. Now my heart's pounding. I excused myself, went to the restroom, took this wire out, put it in my jeans, put these swim trunks on. So the two of us are walking out to this pool. It was just so quiet. I saw a shovel against the house, a hole in the ground. I thought, oh my God, is this guy going to try to kill me or something? And he was just having some landscaping done. But we got in the swimming pool. He grabs a tennis ball, and we're playing this awkward game of catch. He's pouring it on psychologically. After a few minutes of freaking me out, he said, Tom, I've been acting kind of weird. He has to ask me a question. I said, what do you want to know? He said, okay, Tom, had I been approached by the SEC, who's the regulator? And truthfully, I could say, no, not the SEC, of course, because it was the FBI. He doesn't catch that nuance. He's like, okay, I'm sorry. I just had to make sure you weren't wearing a wire. And he starts making implicating statements about the stocks I had asked him about before. Obviously, that wasn't recorded in the swimming pool. He was actually never charged for insider trading. He was one of the worst actors. And so that was my scariest moment going through all this. Eventually, 20 people were arrested on CNBC in 2009. 20 people are in handcuffs. And on the CNBC ticker on the bottom running across the screen, it said Tipper X is the person responsible for this. I called the FBI and said, hey, am I Tipper X? And they said yes. And I thought, oh my God, is my life in danger? Like, is my name coming out? No, it's fine. But Tom, you should probably talk to an attorney. So I cold called a few attorneys in Manhattan. I said, hey, I'm Tipper X. The FBI said I should talk to you. And of course, my attorney said, well, who was your attorney before me? I said, I haven't spoken to anybody. He said, Tom, you're supposed to hire me the first day the FBI approached you. I said, hey, it's my first time doing this. So it's pretty straightforward. Time to plead guilty in court, self-surrender at the FBI, go into court, plead guilty. A very humbling day where I would play mental games with myself. The FBI is telling me I'm doing a great job. Maybe they're going to hire me when this is all over. That's not going to happen. Or maybe they'll drop the charges because I'm doing such a great job. That won't happen. The judge says, how do you plead, Tom? United States of America versus Thomas Hardin on the piece of paper. Just a very humbling day. Pled guilty. My name came out to the press a few months later. The Wall Street Journal reporter figured out who Tipper X was, leaked it all, put my wife and my daughter's name in the article and all this information. And so I lost so many contacts, connections, friends that day because of what I did. People had trust in me and they couldn't believe I was involved in this. And I wasn't sentenced for like 7 years until 2015. No prison, but had to take a felony conviction because of the trades. And then eventually, a year after I was sentenced, I get a phone call from an unlisted number. And I thought, oh my God, is this the FBI again? And it was. And my wife said, what did you do now? She stayed with me through all this. And I said, what do you guys want? And they said, I was the youngest person they charged back in the day, and the 46,000 was the lowest. And I said, well, thanks for rubbing it in. I was trying not to get caught. And they said, actually, no, we never figured out the Tom Hardin decision making, like why I was involved with this, why I did what I did. And they gave me the idea to go out and speak about it. So that's where I am today. But we can again go
Yeah.
back to anything
So
here.
one thing I want to bring up here too, and we circled back to this earlier, is how that one decision can roll out and look so different. And in fact, in really changed the trajectory of your whole career. For you,
Yes.
that trade and those four trades ended up ending your financial analyst career, becoming a FBI informant, probably bringing on a lot of stress, right?
Yes.
And really pivoting for you. What was it like as you were going through the repercussions of those decisions that were just such, like you said in the beginning, a few keystrokes,
Yeah.
and how that played out over time in your head, as you're the FBI informant, as you're dealing with the aftermath, even to this day?
Yeah. So at the time before the FBI approached me, I didn't really lose sleep over the trades as I was able to rationalize it. We make thousands of trades a year. On my moral compass in my head, four bad ones. If other people are making a lot more than I am, you can kind of compare yourself to others and just say, oh, I'm not doing as bad as the other guy. And so that was kind of what kept me going. And really, it was 7 months after the fourth trade when they approached me. So I kind of just forgotten about it. And to be honest, I probably would have kept doing it, just like the tips stopped coming in. So I hate to say it, like, would I have stopped had the FBI not stopped me? Like, probably not. It's kind of uncomfortable to say. Like, I was really into doing this just a few times, and so they
Mhm.
stopped me. And then to your point, yeah, it was a shocking moment. I think I was probably just going through a lot of like major stress, financial crisis. Never talked to like a professional psychiatrist or anything about this. Just talked to my wife. She stayed with me, and so she probably has her own presentation she could give about how she stayed with me in situations where 85% of marriages end. And so that was actually very helpful. I don't know if I was suicidal, but I was my darkest moments. And when I told her and she understood what happened and she understood what I had to do, I mean, I could tell you again, like most wives in that situation would have left the husband because they were probably in for the future hedge fund manager and not Tipper X. So that at least mentally helped me kind of get through this. And then again, I would just play mind games with myself, like, okay, the FBI is saying I'm doing such a great job, maybe they're going to hire me. Then I did also deal with even after they told me to speak at the or called me to speak at the FBI. I didn't ever feel like speaking about this because I dealt with so much shame. Like I'm a piece of crap and did broke the law versus like I didn't understand that until after several of my first speaking engagements where it was very dark, self beating myself up. I'm a terrible person. I did a bad thing. And one of the conferences I was speaking at said, the audience doesn't think you're okay. And so she said, what you're dealing with is shame, and that's not healthy. But guilt is actually what keeps me going and sharing the story with young professionals. But the shame part took me several years to figure out the difference between shame. I'm a bad person, did a bad thing versus guilt. I'm not a bad person, I did a bad thing. I'm trying to educate others. That was a real opening for me mentally, I think, just to have some clarity on that.
And I like how you brought that up because I think it's so important for our audience to know it can be a shift of the mindset on how you look at this situation or any situation you're going through. You can deal with the guilt versus the shame, and they can seem very similar. But when you shift it to, okay, it's the guilt of what I did rather than let me be shameful, like you said, let me take what I did and be able to help others expand their knowledge, be more aware how the decisions can affect us. But one thing you did that played out through your story as well is the second the FBI approached you, you owned it. You said, yes, I did it. And now what can I do to rectify the decisions I've made? And I think that plays a lot into your overall character and how we can all look at things. It shouldn't always be trying to hide decisions we make, because in the moment we realize how it has become amplified than maybe what we were feeling in the moment. But the second you go, okay, what can I do to make it better and also help others? That is really when you can elevate yourself and also, get through it in a different light as well.
Yeah, it was important to me. And now any lawyer listening will say, well, Tom should have talked to an attorney that first day, taken the FBI's card. And that's usually the proper procedure. And then eventually probably, help the FBI and go through that. But like you said, I guess I knew I did it and I knew I was guilty. And I felt like it's just time to start confessing. And then later that afternoon, I went to actually a Catholic priest with a confession too. So my first confession was to the FBI. Maybe it should have been in reverse order. Spoke to the priest at St. Patrick's in New York City. And he's like, look, it sounds like 99% of your life you were on the right path, 1% of your life, these four trades you really messed up. But you can't define yourself by that 1%. And if the FBI has given you a chance to help clean up the industry, basically my penance from the priest was go help the FBI. And so I think, again, meeting the priest that day and getting that input, and my wife saying the same thing a few days later, it took me a few days to be able to have the courage to tell her this, was definitely helpful. Just owning my bad decisions. And I think another takeaway is for years when I started speaking, people were like, "Oh, you made a bunch of mistakes and paid for it." Like I didn't make any mistakes. I made bad decisions, and I think it's important for people to think about. We make mistakes like inadvertently. We make bad decisions like knowing what we're doing, and so I think it's important for people not to call their bad decisions mistakes because you're not owning it. So you totally have to own both, but really own your bad decisions and learn from them. So that's just something I learned the hard way. But I see it so many times when somebody does something. Oh, I made a mistake. Oh, what did you do? I embezzled $5 million. Oh, that's a bad decision, I think, and that's not. You didn't just fall into the keyboard. So I think it's important for people to think about that through life.
Before we move on and talk about what you're doing now, I do want to touch upon the fact, once again, that you are one of the biggest informants in history in the FBI. Now, looking back, right, and being more distant from what was happening in real time, what do you think? How do you kind of see that and approach it as knowing that you were one of the biggest players in the informant world?
Yeah. So it wasn't ever my plan. Graduating from Penn to be, be an informant. Somebody asked me years ago, "Did you make those trades?" I go, "Talk about it." Like, this was not the master. This is not the master plan. And so I look at it like I made the decisions I did at the time. I felt it was the right thing to do at the time. Some people have an issue like, oh, you didn't go to prison, you helped them, and you sent a bunch of people to prison. The way I felt at the time was if the FBI has given me a chance to clean up people who I felt were really bad actors and really taking advantage of all their trades were basically across the line. How did I rationalize it then? That's how I thought about it. Like they're giving me a chance to clean up the industry. Hopefully it does help me out. But I know people can listen to this and have an issue with, oh, you just flipped on other people. But I had an open playing field to help the FBI do, take down people. And now, part of me initially was, why would I ever talk about this? I'm very ashamed of what I did early in my career. But I really think like I just have to lean into this and own it. Like it's a felony conviction. If you Google me, now it's all the speaking stuff. Before it was all the bad stuff. And so some people in my situation will try to clean up their Google, clean up their reputation, get a reputation manager. Might as well own it because I've just gotten so much feedback over the years that people get value from this. And so that's the way I look at it today rather than trying to hide it and not talk about it, which I did for years. as a stay-at-home father, hey, what do you do? Well, I worked in finance during the crisis and I just left, but don't Google me. Now it's an easier thing just to own it. And so, that's how I look at like owning our bad decisions and trying to help others.
And I think it's really important, something you just had brought up, is the fact, even if you try to clean it up, especially in
Mhm.
today's society of social media and how coding works on the back end with Facebook and LinkedIn and just
Yeah.
everything comes to light at one point, whether it's on social media or not. At some point in your life, it might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, it might not be in a year from now, but every decision gets brought to light and every bad choice gets brought to light at some point, and people will find out about it. So the sooner you're upfront with it, you're transparent with it, you get the narrative of your story. You get to be the one to go, this is what happened, this is how it played out. Instead of people Googling you, instead of people making decisions on who you are, how you acted, why you did something, when you own it like you did, Tom, you get to write the narrative. It's your story and you get to say the way it is. For you, I want to lean in to you deciding to become a speaker, go out, tell your story. What are some of the things now you try to share with individuals about their decision making, how it can affect it when you go into organizations or you do speaking jobs?
Yeah, so a couple of things. The FBI invited me to speak. They said, a lot of people would like to hear this. I did a cold email of like 500 chief compliance officers. I think I bought an email list in New York City. Hey, I'm Tipper X. Could I come talk to your team? Two people responded of 500. One thought it was a cybersecurity attack because it didn't sound like Tipper X was real. So no, that's another training you can have. And then one person brought me in, didn't pay me, just said it sounds better than regular compliance training, and went in and shared the story. And what's come out over the years are a few takeaways I think people key on. One is the idea of making a decision in isolation, like I did. Like I didn't talk to my boss, didn't talk to compliance, obviously, didn't talk to anybody else. Made that decision on my own in my head to cross that line. So I think it's really important for people to not make decisions in isolation or get outside your own head. When my boss comes into my office and says we have to make money every month, I didn't ask any clarifying questions as the junior employee. Do you mean stay within the legal and ethical guardrails, or are we going to do what everybody else is doing it? So that's one thing, isolate decision making. Another thing I think in my 20s for younger people and for older people is like to have a mentor. I didn't have any mentors. My boss was my mentor, obviously, not a great mentor. So I think if I had been talking to somebody outside my industry, maybe, hey, it seems like everybody's doing it. This woman just called me with this tip. I'm thinking about making a small trade. The right person would have slapped me around. Why would you ever do this? You're on this path to this great career. And there's an image of sort of the iceberg underwater where I could see the success like right above the water or the risk. And I couldn't see the risk below the water where that's all the risk. And I think that's like the powerful visual I use in my presentations. Like here's your risk and reward. And so just having a mentor, not making a decision in isolation, and for senior managers to be really careful with not giving ambiguous messages to teams, being very clear in your directives. Ambiguity can really cause problems in organizations where it's kind of ambiguous and the leader doesn't clarify it with my boss. So those are just a few things that have come out over the years with the presentation.
For you, how do you walk into an organization and make sure that the message really sticks, but people can start changing their mindset or how they might make those isolated decisions versus not as soon as they leave? Like, what are some of those small
Yeah.
things people can start implementing?
So the biggest things actually mentioned it before, but people always come up and say that whole insight on mistakes versus bad decisions was totally eye-opening, and not just in work, in life,
Mhm.
with people's children when they go home. And my kids bear the brunt of this now with my deep dive into the psychology, where they're now both in middle school. And one of my daughters came home and said, "Oh, I got a bad grade on my math test. I made a few mistakes." And so, how many mistakes? I missed a bunch. Did you study for it? No. Okay, the bad decision was not studying for the test. The mistakes are because of the bad decision. So that's one thing that people kind of always leave with and come right up right afterwards, and I hear back that the client will email and say they're talking about this all the time, mistakes and bad decisions. And then the making decisions in isolation, where in organizations are there certain groups or divisions where isolated decision making could be more of a risk for the company, and why is that, and doing deep dives. And so what I think I need to develop is not just this talk I go around and give, but also probably a follow-up workshop on this. And that's what I'm trying to work with a few of my past clients. Like, where do we go deep dive on this a little bit more after sort of a scared straight talk at the beginning, and then, where do we go deeper? So.
And I think it's important, and I love how you really just brought those 2 points to the forefront, because mistakes versus bad decisions, and your example with the math test is so true. They roll into each other. You make a bad decision, like not studying, like not preparing for the presentation, like just saying yes instead of doing the research, which then plays into the mistakes that happen because you don't know. You told your manager, yes, I could do this. You don't know anything that's going on.
Right.
You just start doing things, and you can start affecting millions of dollars worth of business. You can take that to a small business level as well, even if you're not in a massive corporation, but you're a solo entrepreneur. You don't know how to file your LLC patent, right? And
Right.
so you start filling it out, you fill it out incorrectly. Fast forward a few years, now, the IRS might be coming after you because things aren't done correctly and all these things. And instead of making the decision to talk to someone who might be privy to that information, how to file, be able to answer those questions for you instead of making isolated decisions, now you're playing catch up.
That's right. That's really a great, summary of everything. Just getting outside your own head and asking questions alone can hopefully mitigate a lot of these problems for people. And I also think companies I work with often will have create muscle memory. So let's create a scenario inside this company. What does it look like when the boss comes in with a directive that's very short term, long term to short term, or ambiguous? And how do we empower the junior person to actually speak up and feel courageous enough to ask those questions? I mean, every company I speak at now has a speak up program, usually run through HR. If you see something, say something. But most companies, it's very hard to implement because the junior people are afraid to speak up. So I think if you're going to tell people to speak up, you have to have the senior people also listen up. So we rarely hear about the listen up. We just hear about speak up everywhere. So another thing for companies to think about.
For you, I want to kind of wrap this up by asking you the question, looking back on your journey and the bad decisions and the mistakes you've made and the way you've taken those and tried to help others go on a different path and have their eyes open to the mistakes and bad decisions they could make and how they can pivot from that. What has been the most rewarding part of your journey, and the part that you didn't think you'd be in a place with now that you are today?
Yeah, so really, any type of feedback or emails that I get from people in the crowd, saying, I'll never forget this. For me, it doesn't have to be young professionals, but when it is a young professional in their 20s, I think it's really rewarding. For younger people, I think I was drowning in insecurity because my competitors were cheating to get ahead. And once I had the opportunity, I fell prey to that temptation too, where I should have just been focused on self-improvement, competing with myself. In my business, it's a lot of pattern recognition with investing. You see something before, you can apply that later. So I think for any industry, like competing against yourself, who cares if your competition is cheating to get ahead? Because eventually they're going to get caught. And don't drown in insecurity. So that's one thing. If I could go back 40 something Tom, talk to 20 something Tom, don't drown in insecurity. Just compete against yourself. That's all you have to compete against.
And I think that's such a good point. And so now I'm going to ask this question, because we all battle with insecurity. And if you're someone who has never had an insecure feeling, I'd love to talk to that individual
Right.
and see what it's like. And whether that's in the workplace or in your personal life. And sometimes it can hit you when you least expect it, or something that you feel super confident about, and you could then get nervous. For you, how do you deal throughout your life when you have those moments of insecurity now?
Yeah, no, I try to talk to, keep a really good close friend network and colleague network and other trainer network. And there's people that I have a trusted network and who have the same values as myself to kind of discuss. Um, I think going through life now in my 40s, not to get off topic, but a lot of people just sort of can be isolated or, there's studies that think, especially with men, as they get isolated when they get older, depression can happen, that type of thing. So I think it's really important, and I try to cultivate just sort of like keeping in touch with friends. I think as we get older, we do less of that, and just making sure that I can have a group of people that I can share anything with, be totally transparent, and have the trust that they're going to give me the best guidance I can. And so, not again going back to isolated decision making, not making decisions in isolation, even today. And if I can impart all this to my children too, I was always worried, when are they going to finally understand what I do or what happened in the past? And now I could freely talk about it with them in their own way. They're still in middle school, but they understand. Today there's so much temptation with cheating in schools now with AI and everything, that the path you could go on. So just coming back to them, like, it could start here when you're 13 years old in middle school. By the time you're 29, if you haven't been caught, you're going to get caught. So just having this crucible of a lived experience, but being able to impart that wisdom to them.
I want to touch upon that because it is, especially in today's age, with so much temptation that's out there. But as you said, we all have our journey and we all have things, whether it be a criminal act or not, that we might not be our proudest moment. And sometimes we go, okay, what's going to happen when I have children, or they get old enough to be able to see it and come across it? Either, you look at Kim Kardashian and the sex tape thing, and having her talking about her journey of having to explain that to her children, and whether it's they accidentally might find it or someone might bring it up to them. How did you approach talking to your children about it? And when did you know it was the right time, at least for you and your family? Because I'm guessing there's a lot of parents that go through things that, especially when technology is so easy accessible in today's age, that might be asking themselves, when's the right time?
Yeah, and really, I don't know if I handled it correctly when I started speaking 7 years ago when they were younger. Younger, my oldest, when she was in fourth grade, I guess, was Googling because she knew something about dad committed a crime. A fourth grader, my dad committed a crime. Apparently, she was Googling on the Chromebook in school, and the school can monitor all that stuff. And they called my wife actually and said, "Just want to let you know your daughter's Googling your husband." And so maybe I should have explained it to her first, but also, I mean, I was trying to kind of shield them from my past until I felt that they were ready. So that was a perfect moment in fourth grade to start having a conversation at her level. Hey, cheating is a choice, and unfortunately, when I was younger, I made this decision to cheat, and it was a total choice and a bad choice on my part. And then every year, introducing a little bit more of my past situation with them at their level, so they understand it. And also, if they see anything at school, to come home and have that conversation, at dinner, what did you see today? Or just if it comes up, and, both of them now in middle school just come home and say, oh, there's all this cheating going on the homeworks or the test or who's copying who, and just say, hey, Hardins, we don't do that. We have a set of values. And I think even as a student, as a young professional, I didn't have that set of values that I lived by. It was just like, how much money can I make this year? And I was very focused on the short term. So had I had that set of values, I probably could have seen my situation, my company, the culture was not the right place to be. But I didn't have that core set of values that I have today and try to impart with them.
And I love how you brought up the fact that it's introducing it to them in ways they're going to understand at their level, where they
Right.
are today. And also being like, okay, if you hear something or you see something, like you said earlier, you bring it to us and I will
Yeah.
explain it. And I think it
Right.
then opens up the ways of communication on a lot of different levels with your child as well.
Yeah, with children or senior people with younger professionals or people that are your mentees, having that same open door. I think sometimes companies, the mentor mentee program is too much like a second boss, where the mentor should be more like a third parent to an adult child, where you can talk about more than just work, like everything in life. So I always encourage my clients to have it more that way and not a second boss, because you're not going to have the same mentor-mentee relationships as you would have, with a third parent.
I love that. Tom, how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you?
Sure. So my website, now I've trademarked the FBI code name for me, TipperX, TIPPERX.com. Tom at TipperX is my email. Feel free to reach out. I do all my own booking of my engagements, and I'm also on LinkedIn, occasionally posting about just sort of things in the news that happen and my take on that. So I would love to connect with everyone.
Well, thank you, Tom, for all of your insight today.
Thank you, Olivia. It's a pleasure to be here.
A few of our key takeaways from today's conversation include small incremental decisions can affect you long term. Tom has openly shared that today throughout our whole conversation. In the moment, something can seem, especially in the environment you are in, like it is no big deal, even though to your core, there can be repercussions. And you might not know at that moment what they are long term, but just realize that all those small incremental decisions do add up to something, and keep that in your mind when you're making a decision. Am I going to be happy if this adds up in a negative, potentially in a negative way? As well as don't define yourself by that 1% choice time. We all have to understand that we are more than just the decisions we make. We are humans, and it is also how you grow and learn from things, and those 1% decision moments that really shape who you are and the effect that you might have on other individuals. For Tom, that was making the decision to come clean to the FBI and then figuring out a way to help others and better the industry, the people investing in a lot of different ways. And now taking that a step further to helping young professionals, different organizations, to be aware of how things can play out and how to prepare yourself to not be put in that position, as well as ask clarifying questions. I think it's so important. Sometimes we get scared to ask the next question if we're not sure about something. We make those decisions in isolation, going, I can't let anyone know that I don't know this answer, or I'm not sure about what's going on, because it is my boss, potentially, because it's the environment I'm in. I don't want to look a certain way, when in reality, not asking that clarifying question can lead to a lot more mistakes or poor decisions than just taking the moment to say, listen, I don't know what I don't know. Is this what you mean by that? As well as not just saying something, but listening up. I think one of the most important things Tom has brought up is it isn't just about saying something all the time when you see something, but also taking the initiative and the stance to be listening to the environment around you by making the choice to say, okay, this doesn't seem right. Or like Tom had said too, the importance of mentors and looking as a mentor for those times where you don't know if the decision you're making is the best decision. And lastly, the point about when to talk to individuals about your own story and being the narrative to your story, the narrator to your own story, and being transparent with your journey so you can make the impact and purpose you want. This was a great episode with our top-notch guest, Tom Hardin. Thank you for listening and have a successful day.